Quiet the storm within. Rewire your anxiety and focus the mind through awareness, choice, and inner rebalancing. In the quiet hours of dawn, when the world still sleeps, millions of people around the globe awaken to an unwelcome companion. It arrives without invitation, settling into the chest like a heavy stone, quickening the heartbeat, and filling the mind with racing thoughts that spiral into an endless vortex of what-if scenarios. This companion has a name: anxiety. And for far too many, it has become not just a visitor, but a permanent resident in their daily experience. What if I told you that this seemingly insurmountable force that grips your mind and body is not your permanent reality? What if the very mechanisms that create anxiety's stranglehold also hold the keys to your liberation? Today, we embark on a journey into the depths of human consciousness and physiology, where cutting-edge neuroscience meets ancient wisdom, where understanding becomes the foundation for transformation, and where you will discover that the power to quiet the storm within lies not in some distant cure, but in the remarkable capacity of your own mind and body to heal, rebalance, and thrive. The human brain, in all its magnificent complexity, processes approximately 11 million bits of information every second, yet only about 40 bits reach our conscious awareness. In those vast unconscious processing centers, patterns form, neural pathways solidify, and automatic responses develop that can either serve our well-being or trap us in cycles of suffering. Anxiety, at its core, represents a dysregulation of these ancient survival systems, a hijacking of circuits designed to protect us from genuine threats, now activated by the shadows and phantoms of modern life. But here lies the profound hope embedded in our neurobiology. The same plasticity that allows anxiety to take root also enables complete transformation. Every moment of awareness, every conscious choice, every deliberate practice literally reshapes the architecture of your brain. This is not metaphor or wishful thinking. This is documented, measurable, scientifically verified reality. The journey we are about to undertake together is not merely about managing symptoms or coping with anxiety. This is about fundamental transformation, about rewiring the very circuits that generate distress, about cultivating an unshakable inner stability that remains centered regardless of external circumstances. This is about rediscovering the peace that is your natural birthright, hidden beneath layers of conditioned reactivity and learned helplessness. Through the lens of modern neuroscience, we now understand that anxiety is not a character flaw, not a sign of weakness, not something to be ashamed of or simply endured. It is a complex interplay of brain chemistry, neural circuitry, learned responses, and somatic patterns that can be understood, addressed, and fundamentally transformed through specific scientifically backed approaches that honor both the sophistication of the nervous system and the profound wisdom embedded in conscious awareness. In the pages that follow, you will discover how anxiety creates its grip through intricate feedback loops between thought, emotion, and bodily sensation. You will learn how the brain's threat detection systems can become hyperactive, creating false alarms that flood your system with stress chemicals designed for emergencies that exist only in the realm of imagination. You will understand how past experiences become embedded in your nervous system, creating automatic responses that no longer serve your current reality. More importantly, you will discover the precise mechanisms through which awareness, choice, and inner rebalancing can restore harmony to your entire being. You will learn specific techniques grounded in neuroscience that can literally rewire your brain's response to stress and uncertainty. You will discover how to work with your body's own healing intelligence, how to regulate your nervous system, and how to cultivate an inner sanctuary of peace that remains accessible even in life's most challenging moments. This transformation requires neither supernatural powers nor pharmaceutical interventions, though it does not exclude them. It requires something both simpler and more profound: the willingness to turn toward your experience with curiosity rather than resistance, to understand the mechanisms that drive anxiety, and to engage with proven practices that honor the remarkable capacity for healing and growth that exists within every human nervous system. The ancient Greek aphorism, "Know thyself," takes on new meaning when we understand that self-knowledge includes intimate familiarity with the workings of our own minds and bodies. In anxiety, we often feel like victims of forces beyond our control, tossed about by internal storms that seem to arise from nowhere and disappear according to no discernible pattern. But when we understand the precise mechanisms through which anxiety operates, when we learn to recognize its early warning signs, and when we develop specific skills for intervention and transformation, we move from victimhood to empowerment, from helplessness to mastery, from suffering to freedom. The path ahead requires patience, compassion, and consistent engagement. Neural pathways that have been years or decades in the making do not transform overnight, but they do transform every moment of mindful awareness, every conscious choice to respond rather than react. Every practice that brings your nervous system back into balance contributes to a fundamental rewiring that creates lasting change. As we begin this exploration together, remember that healing is not a destination, but a journey of returning to your natural state of well-being. The peace you seek is not something to be acquired or achieved, but something to be uncovered, like removing layers of dust from a precious gem that has always been there, waiting to shine forth with its natural brilliance. Chapter 1. The Hidden Architecture of Anxiety. Deep within the labyrinthine corridors of your brain, an ancient drama unfolds every moment of every day. It is a drama older than language, older than civilization, older than consciousness itself. In structures that evolved millions of years ago when our ancestors faced very different threats in very different worlds, a complex system of threat detection and response operates with lightning speed, scanning, evaluating, and responding to potential dangers before your conscious mind even knows what is happening. This system, refined through countless generations of evolutionary pressure, represents one of nature's most sophisticated survival mechanisms. It can detect a predator in peripheral vision, mobilize your entire physiology for fight or flight, and coordinate split-second responses that can mean the difference between life and death. It is a system so fundamental to survival that it operates below the threshold of conscious awareness, making decisions and initiating responses with a speed and efficiency that conscious thought could never match. But in the modern world, this ancient system finds itself in foreign territory. The threats it was designed to detect rarely appear in contemporary life. There are no saber-toothed tigers lurking in office cubicles, no immediate physical dangers requiring instant mobilization of stress hormones and fight-or-flight responses. Yet the system continues to operate according to its ancient programming, now responding to psychological and social stresses, as if they were immediate threats to physical survival. The almond-shaped structure, we call the amygdala, serves as the brain's primary threat detection center. Smaller than your thumb, this remarkable region processes emotional information with breathtaking speed, evaluating every sensory input for potential danger. It can recognize a fearful face in 1/20th of a second, faster than the blink of an eye. It can detect emotional undertones in voices, subtle changes in body language, environmental cues that suggest threat, all while your conscious mind remains completely unaware of its activity. When the amygdala detects potential danger, it initiates a cascade of responses that flood your body with stress hormones. Adrenaline and cortisol surge through your bloodstream, your heart rate accelerates, your breathing becomes shallow and rapid. Blood flows away from digestive organs toward major muscle groups, and your entire nervous system shifts into a state of heightened vigilance and arousal. This response can mobilize extraordinary physical capabilities, enabling superhuman feats of strength, speed, and endurance when genuine survival is at stake. The genius of this system lies in its speed and efficiency. There is no time for deliberation when facing immediate physical threat. The amygdala bypasses the slower processes of rational thought, sending urgent signals directly to the body's stress response systems through what neuroscientists call the low road of emotional processing. Only after this emergency response is initiated does information reach the prefrontal cortex, where conscious evaluation and decision-making occur. In situations of genuine emergency, this system operates flawlessly, providing exactly the physiological support needed for survival. The problem arises when this ancient threat detection system encounters the complexities of modern life. A demanding email from your supervisor, financial pressures, relationship conflicts, social media comparisons, global news, uncertain futures, and countless other psychological stressors trigger the same physiological responses that were designed for escaping from predators. The amygdala cannot distinguish between a charging rhinoceros and a challenging conversation with your boss. It responds to both with the same urgent biochemical alarm system. But while the physical threat of a predator is immediate and resolves quickly, the psychological stresses of modern life are often chronic and persistent. The stress response that was designed to operate for minutes or hours can become activated for days, weeks, months, or even years. This chronic activation of the stress response system creates what we experience as anxiety. Instead of brief, intense periods of activation followed by complete relaxation and recovery, the nervous system becomes trapped in a state of ongoing vigilance and arousal. The body remains flooded with stress hormones, muscles stay tense and ready for action, and the mind continues scanning for threats even when none exist. Over time, this chronic activation literally changes the brain's structure and function. Neural pathways that carry threat-related information become strengthened and enlarged, like hiking trails that become superhighways through repeated use. The brain develops what neuroscientists call negativity bias, becoming increasingly sensitive to potential threats while simultaneously becoming less sensitive to positive experiences and information. The prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for rational thinking, planning, and emotional regulation, can become overwhelmed by constant stress signals from the amygdala. Like a concerned executive receiving urgent crisis reports every few minutes, the prefrontal cortex struggles to maintain perspective and make reasoned decisions when bombarded with emergency signals from the brain's threat detection systems. This creates a particularly insidious cycle. As the prefrontal cortex becomes less effective at regulating emotional responses, the amygdala's threat detection becomes even more sensitive and reactive. What neuroscientists call amygdala hijack becomes increasingly common, where emotional responses overwhelm rational thought processes, leading to decisions and behaviors driven by fear rather than wisdom. Research using functional magnetic resonance imaging has revealed fascinating details about how anxiety reshapes brain function. In people with chronic anxiety, the amygdala shows hyperactivity, responding more strongly and more frequently to potential threats. Meanwhile, the connections between the amygdala and prefrontal cortex, which normally allow rational thought to modulate emotional responses, become weakened and less effective. The hippocampus, crucial for memory formation and contextual understanding, also shows significant changes in chronic anxiety. This brain region helps distinguish between past and present, between memory and current reality, between situations that genuinely require concern and those that simply resemble past threats. In anxiety disorders, hippocampal function becomes compromised, making it difficult to accurately assess current situations without contamination from past experiences. But perhaps most importantly, the default mode network, a set of brain regions that become active when we are not focused on external tasks, shows altered patterns in anxiety disorders. This network, which includes regions involved in self-reflection, future planning, and mental simulation, can become dominated by worry, rumination, and anxious anticipation. Instead of creative thinking and peaceful rest, the default state of mental activity becomes characterized by vigilance and concern. These neurobiological changes create the subjective experience we know as anxiety: the racing heart, the shallow breathing, the muscular tension, the racing thoughts, the difficulty concentrating, the sense of impending doom, the constant vigilance for potential threats. What feels like a psychological or emotional problem is actually a complex interplay of neurobiological systems responding to perceived threats, according to ancient programming, that no longer serves our current environment. Understanding anxiety at this neurobiological level reveals both the challenge and the opportunity. The challenge is that these systems operate largely below conscious awareness, with lightning speed, according to patterns established through millions of years of evolution and reinforced through personal experience. We cannot simply think our way out of anxiety any more than we can think our way out of jumping when startled by a sudden loud noise. The opportunity, however, lies in understanding these mechanisms clearly enough to work with them skillfully. While we cannot control the amygdala's initial threat detection, we can learn to influence its sensitivity over time. While we cannot prevent stress hormones from being released when threats are detected, we can learn techniques that help metabolize these chemicals more efficiently and return to baseline more quickly. Most importantly, we can learn to strengthen the prefrontal cortex's capacity for emotional regulation, while simultaneously helping the amygdala become more discriminating in its threat detection. Through specific practices that we will explore in detail, It is possible to literally rewire these ancient systems, creating new patterns of neural activity that serve our contemporary lives rather than imprisoning us in outdated survival responses. The key insight that emerges from neuroscientific research is that awareness itself becomes the foundation for transformation. When we understand how anxiety operates at the biological level, we can begin to recognize its early warning signs, interrupt its escalation, and engage with proven techniques that restore balance to the nervous system. This is not about eliminating the threat detection system, which serves important protective functions when functioning properly. This is about restoring these ancient systems to their natural balance and efficiency, allowing them to protect us from genuine threats while freeing us from the tyranny of false alarms that characterize chronic anxiety. The brain that created anxiety patterns also possesses the remarkable capacity to create new patterns. Every moment of conscious awareness, every skillful response to stress, every practice that brings the nervous system back into balance contributes to a fundamental rewiring that moves us from reactivity toward resilience, from fear toward freedom, from anxiety toward authentic peace. Chapter 2. When the mind becomes the enemy. In the theater of consciousness, a peculiar and often devastating drama unfolds daily for millions of people around the world. The very faculty that represents humanity's greatest achievement, the conscious mind with its capacity for abstract thought, planning, creativity, and self-reflection, becomes the source of profound suffering. The mind that can compose symphonies, solve complex mathematical equations, and ponder the nature of existence itself, turns its considerable powers against its own well-being, creating elaborate scenarios of threat and danger that exist only in the realm of imagination. This is perhaps anxiety's cruelest irony. The very cognitive abilities that have enabled human civilization, the capacity for future planning, pattern recognition, and scenario modeling, become hijacked by the brain's ancient threat detection systems. Instead of serving our flourishing, these remarkable capabilities become enlisted in an endless campaign of worry, catastrophic thinking, and anticipatory dread that can make daily life feel like navigating through a psychological minefield. The human brain's extraordinary capacity for mental time travel allows us to project ourselves into hypothetical futures, learning from past experiences and preparing for likely challenges. This cognitive ability provides enormous evolutionary advantages, enabling complex planning, tool creation, social cooperation, and adaptation to changing environments. But when this same capacity becomes influenced by an overactive threat detection system, it transforms into a generator of endless anxious scenarios. Consider the intricate dance between thought and emotion that characterizes anxious experience. A simple trigger, perhaps a text message from your supervisor requesting a meeting, initiates a cascade of mental activity that can quickly spiral into overwhelming anxiety. The initial thought, "My boss wants to see me," might seem neutral enough, but when processed through a nervous system primed for threat detection, it immediately spawns related thoughts. "This must be about something I did wrong. Maybe I'm going to be fired. How will I pay my bills if I lose my job?" Each thought carries emotional charge, and each emotion generates physical sensations that the brain then interprets as evidence supporting the threatening thoughts. The tight feeling in your chest confirms that something is indeed wrong. The racing heart validates the sense of danger. The churning stomach proves that concern is justified. This creates what psychologists call a positive feedback loop, where each component amplifies the others in an escalating cycle of distress. What makes this process particularly insidious is its self-perpetuating nature. Anxious thoughts create emotional responses, which generate physical sensations, which the mind then interprets as evidence confirming the validity of the anxious thoughts. The very act of worrying about potential problems becomes evidence that those problems are real and imminent, even when they exist only in the realm of possibility. The mind's remarkable pattern recognition abilities, which normally serve us well in learning and adaptation, become corrupted in anxiety disorders. Instead of recognizing truly relevant patterns that inform wise decision-making, the anxious mind begins detecting threatening patterns where none exist. A colleague's brief response to an email becomes evidence of disapproval. A moment of silence in a conversation suggests rejection. A minor physical sensation signals serious illness. This hypervigilant pattern detection creates what cognitive psychologists call probability overestimation. where unlikely negative events feel probable or even certain. The anxious mind calculates odds like a broken computer, systematically overestimating the likelihood of negative outcomes while underestimating both positive possibilities and our own capacity to handle challenges. A presentation that has a 99% chance of going well becomes a certain disaster in anxious imagination. Simultaneously, anxiety creates catastrophic thinking, where relatively minor challenges become magnified into existential threats. A social mistake transforms into evidence of fundamental inadequacy. A work deadline becomes a test of personal worth. A relationship conflict signals inevitable abandonment. The mind's capacity for worst-case scenario planning, which can be valuable in appropriate contexts, becomes a source of constant torment when applied indiscriminately to every aspect of life. The internal experience of this mental hijacking can feel like being held hostage by your own thoughts. Many people describe feeling like passive observers of their own mental activity, watching helplessly as their minds generate one threatening scenario after another. They know rationally that most of their worries are unlikely to materialize, yet feel powerless to stop the endless stream of anxious thoughts. This sense of powerlessness becomes compounded by what psychologists call meta-anxiety, becoming anxious about being anxious. The very presence of anxious thoughts becomes interpreted as evidence of weakness, failure, or mental illness. People begin to fear their own minds, creating an additional layer of distress that can be even more debilitating than the original anxiety. The anxious mind also demonstrates remarkable creativity in generating new concerns. No sooner is one worry resolved than another takes its place. This phenomenon, known as worry substitution, reveals how anxiety is not really about the specific content of worried thoughts, but about an underlying dysregulation of the nervous system that seeks expression through whatever concerns are available in current life circumstances. Research in cognitive neuroscience has revealed fascinating details about how anxiety reshapes thought processes. Brain imaging studies show that anxious individuals demonstrate altered activity in regions responsible for attention, memory, and decision-making. Attention becomes biased toward threatening information, memory becomes skewed toward negative experiences, and decision-making becomes dominated by avoidance of potential negative outcomes rather than approach toward positive possibilities. The anterior cingulate cortex, a brain region that monitors for conflicts and inconsistencies, becomes hyperactive in anxiety disorders. This creates a constant sense that something is wrong, that attention and concern are urgently needed, even when objective circumstances provide no cause for alarm. It is like having a smoke detector with a faulty sensitivity setting, creating urgent alarms in response to normal cooking steam. The prefrontal cortex, normally capable of providing perspective and emotional regulation, can become overwhelmed by constant threat signals from the amygdala and other emotional centers. When this happens, higher-order thinking processes become compromised. Complex reasoning gives way to simplified, black-and-white thinking. Flexible problem-solving is replaced by rigid, repetitive worry patterns. Creative thinking yields to catastrophic imagination. Working memory, the mental workspace where we hold and manipulate information, becomes cluttered with anxious thoughts and threat monitoring activities. This leaves less capacity available for the cognitive tasks that require focus and attention. Students find it difficult to concentrate on studying when their minds are occupied with social worries. Workers struggle to focus on projects when their mental resources are consumed by concerns about job security. Parents have trouble being present with their children when their minds are preoccupied with endless hypothetical dangers. The mind's natural capacity for mental simulation, which normally serves creativity and planning, becomes dominated by anxious rehearsals of potential disasters. Instead of imagining positive possibilities or creative solutions, mental simulation becomes trapped in endless loops of worst-case scenarios. The mind that could be dreaming and visioning becomes imprisoned in nightmare anticipation. Language itself becomes weaponized in anxiety, with the mind's capacity for self-talk becoming a source of self-torture rather than self-support. Internal dialogue shifts from encouraging and realistic to critical and catastrophic. The voice in the head that could offer wisdom and perspective instead offers constant commentary about everything that could go wrong, and all the ways current efforts are inadequate. Time perception becomes distorted in anxious states. Present moments feel contaminated by future threats that may never materialize. The capacity to be here now, to experience the immediacy and richness of current experience, becomes lost in a fog of anticipatory dread. Life begins to feel like waiting for the other shoe to drop, with little capacity to enjoy the moments of peace and stability that actually characterize most of daily experience. Perhaps most tragically, the anxious mind begins to distrust its own perceptions and judgments. What psychologists call intolerance of uncertainty develops, where normal ambiguity and unpredictability become sources of distress. The mind demands guarantees and certainties that life cannot provide, creating a perpetual state of dissatisfaction and worry about the unknown. Yet understanding these mental processes in detail reveals the pathway toward healing and transformation. When we recognize anxious thinking patterns as symptoms of nervous system dysregulation rather than accurate assessments of reality, we can begin to develop a different relationship with our own thoughts. When we understand how threat detection systems can hijack cognitive processes, we can learn techniques for restoring balance and perspective. The mind that has become the enemy can be trained to become an ally. The same cognitive flexibility that allows anxiety to proliferate also enables the learning of new thought patterns. The same neural plasticity that reinforces anxious pathways can be directed toward creating pathways of resilience and peace. This transformation begins with awareness, with learning to recognize the difference between thoughts and reality, between possibilities and probabilities, between legitimate concerns and anxiety-driven catastrophizing. It continues with specific practices that restore the mind to its natural capacity for clear thinking, creative problem-solving, and wise discrimination between what deserves attention and what can be safely released. Chapter 3. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Beneath the endless chatter of worried thoughts and the relentless calculations of anxious minds lies a deeper, more fundamental layer of human experience. The body's own intelligence, its cellular memory, its somatic wisdom, that operates far below the threshold of conscious awareness. While our minds race through scenarios of future threats and past regrets, our bodies carry the imprints of every significant experience we have ever had, storing not just the facts of what happened, but the felt sense, the emotional texture, the physiological responses that accompanied those experiences. This embodied memory represents one of the most profound discoveries in modern neuroscience and psychology. The recognition that the body is not merely a vessel for the mind, not simply hardware running mental software, but a sophisticated information processing system in its own right, one that learns, remembers, and responds according to its own subtle intelligence. Understanding this somatic dimension of experience reveals why anxiety can feel so physically overwhelming, and why purely mental approaches to healing often fall short of creating lasting transformation. Every emotion, every thought, every experience leaves traces in the tissues of the body. Trauma and chronic stress create what researchers call somatic markers, patterns of muscular tension, breathing habits, postural changes, and nervous system states that persist long after the original triggering events have passed. These embodied patterns operate like a parallel processing system, constantly influencing our perceptions, emotions, and behaviors through channels that remain largely invisible to conscious awareness. The autonomic nervous system, which controls vital functions like heart rate, breathing, digestion, and blood pressure, serves as the primary interface between psychological experience and physical reality. This system, divided into sympathetic and parasympathetic branches, responds to emotional states and stress levels with remarkable sensitivity, adjusting physiological functions moment by moment based on perceived safety or threat. When the sympathetic nervous system activates in response to stress or danger, it initiates a cascade of physical changes designed to optimize survival. Heart rate increases, breathing becomes rapid and shallow, blood pressure rises, digestive processes slow down, muscles tense for action, and the entire system shifts into a state of heightened alertness and energy mobilization. This response, when functioning properly, provides exactly the physiological support needed to deal with genuine emergencies. The parasympathetic nervous system serves the complementary function of rest, restoration, and recovery. When activated, it slows heart rate, deepens breathing, promotes digestion, relaxes muscular tension, and creates the physiological conditions necessary for healing, growth, and regeneration. This branch of the nervous system governs what researchers call the relaxation response, the body's natural capacity for returning to balance and equilibrium after periods of stress or activation. In healthy functioning, these two branches work together in dynamic balance, with the sympathetic system providing energy and alertness when needed, and the parasympathetic system ensuring adequate rest and recovery. But chronic anxiety and stress can disrupt this natural balance, creating what clinicians call autonomic dysregulation, where the nervous system becomes stuck in patterns of activation that no longer serve current circumstances. People with chronic anxiety often develop what trauma researcher calls hyperarousal, a state where the sympathetic nervous system remains chronically activated, keeping the body in a constant state of vigilance and stress response. Heart rate remains elevated, breathing stays shallow and rapid, muscles maintain chronic tension, and the entire system operates as if under constant threat, even during periods of objective safety. Others may develop hypoarousal, where the parasympathetic system becomes chronically dominant, creating states of depression, fatigue, disconnection, and emotional numbness. Still others oscillate between these extremes, experiencing periods of anxious activation followed by exhausted collapse, creating a roller coaster of physiological states that can be profoundly destabilizing. These patterns of autonomic dysregulation often develop as adaptive responses to difficult life circumstances. A child growing up in an unpredictable or threatening environment learns to maintain constant vigilance, keeping the nervous system in a state of alert readiness. An adult working in a high-stress job may develop chronic tension patterns that initially help meet demanding challenges, but eventually become self-perpetuating sources of distress. The fascia, the connective tissue that surrounds and penetrates every muscle, organ, and structure in the body, serves as another repository for somatic memory. Recent research has revealed that fascia contains vast networks of nerve endings and is richly innervated with sensors that provide constant feedback about body position, movement, and internal states. Trauma and chronic stress can create restrictions and adhesions in fascial tissue that alter movement patterns, breathing capacity, and overall body awareness. Breathing patterns, in particular, serve as both a window into nervous system states and a powerful tool for influencing those states. Chronic anxiety often creates patterns of shallow, rapid, upper chest breathing that maintains the body in a state of subtle activation. These breathing patterns, which may have developed as responses to specific stressful situations, can persist for years or decades, constantly sending signals to the brain that threat is present and vigilance is required. The diaphragm, the large dome-shaped muscle that serves as the primary muscle of breathing, can become chronically tight and restricted in anxiety states. This restriction not only limits breathing capacity, but also affects the functioning of the vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve that connects the brain to major organs throughout the body. The vagus nerve plays a crucial role in activating the parasympathetic nervous system, and its proper functioning is essential for nervous system regulation and emotional well-being. Postural patterns also serve as embodied memories of emotional states and life experiences. The shoulders that remain perpetually raised and tense may reflect years of anticipating emotional or physical blows. The chest that stays collapsed and protected might be guarding against anticipated heartbreak. The jaw that remains clenched could be holding back years of unexpressed words or emotions. These postural patterns, once adaptive responses to challenging circumstances, can become automatic habits that continue to influence emotional states long after their original purpose has been served. The gut, often called the second brain, contains more nerve cells than the spinal cord and produces more neurotransmitters than the brain itself. This enteric nervous system maintains constant communication with the brain through the vagus nerve and other pathways, creating what researchers call the gut-brain axis. Anxiety and stress profoundly affect digestive functioning, and conversely, digestive issues can contribute to anxiety and emotional disturbance. Many people with chronic anxiety develop patterns of chronic muscular tension that can be felt throughout the body. The neck and shoulders become tight and painful. The jaw clenches unconsciously. The lower back aches from chronic bracing. These patterns of tension, while originally protective responses to stress, become sources of ongoing discomfort and additional stress signals that the brain interprets as evidence that threat is present. Sleep patterns, too, become disrupted by anxiety, creating another layer of physiological dysregulation. The body's natural circadian rhythms, which govern cycles of rest and activity, become altered when the nervous system remains chronically activated. Sleep becomes elusive when the body cannot shift into the deep parasympathetic states necessary for restorative rest. What makes these somatic patterns particularly challenging is that they operate largely below conscious awareness. Most people are not conscious of their breathing patterns, their postural habits, their patterns of muscular tension, or their autonomic nervous system states. These embodied responses continue to influence emotional and psychological states through unconscious channels, creating what can feel like mysterious and uncontrollable anxiety that seems to arise from nowhere. Yet this same unconscious nature of somatic patterns also points toward profound possibilities for healing. When we learn to develop conscious awareness of bodily states and sensations, we gain access to powerful tools for influencing nervous system function and emotional well-being. The body's own intelligence, when enlisted as an ally rather than experienced as an adversary, becomes a pathway toward regulation, resilience, and authentic healing. Research in fields like somatic psychology, polyvagal theory, and trauma therapy has revealed specific techniques for working with the body's own healing intelligence. Practices that restore natural breathing patterns, release chronic muscular tension, and support nervous system regulation can create profound shifts in emotional and psychological well-being that complement and often exceed the benefits of purely mental approaches to anxiety treatment. The body remembers everything, but it also has an innate capacity for healing and reorganization. Every breath we take, every movement we make, every moment of conscious embodied awareness contributes to either reinforcing old patterns of dysregulation or creating new patterns of balance and well-being. When we learn to listen to the body's wisdom and respond to its needs with skillful attention, we discover that the very same somatic intelligence that can trap us in anxiety can also become our most powerful ally in creating lasting transformation and authentic peace. Chapter 4: Breaking Free from Automatic Pilot. In the depths of human consciousness lies one of our species' most remarkable capacities, and simultaneously one of our greatest sources of suffering: the ability to operate on automatic pilot. This extraordinary feature of mind allows us to perform complex tasks without conscious attention, to navigate familiar routes while thinking about other matters, to respond to routine situations with practiced efficiency that frees mental resources for novel challenges. Yet this same capacity, when hijacked by anxiety and stress, can trap us in cycles of reactivity that operate far below the threshold of conscious choice. Automatic pilot serves crucial evolutionary functions. Imagine if every morning you had to consciously relearn how to brush your teeth, how to drive to work, how to operate your computer, how to interact with familiar colleagues. The cognitive burden would be overwhelming, leaving little mental capacity available for creative thinking, problem solving, or responding to unexpected challenges. Automaticity allows expertise to develop, habits to form, and complex skills to become effortless through repetition and practice. The human brain accomplishes this remarkable feat through a process neuroscientists call procedural learning, where patterns of thought, emotion, and behavior become encoded in neural networks that can execute complex sequences without conscious oversight. These automatic patterns operate through the basal ganglia, brain structures that learn through repetition and reward, gradually taking over functions that initially required conscious attention and deliberate effort. But in anxiety disorders, this same capacity for automatic functioning becomes corrupted, creating what might be called anxiety autopilot. Learned patterns of threat detection, worry generation, and stress response that operate with mechanical precision below conscious awareness. These patterns can execute complex sequences of anxious thinking and physiological activation, faster than conscious mind can recognize what is happening, much less intervene to change the trajectory. Consider how quickly an anxious response can unfold. A familiar trigger appears, perhaps a critical tone in someone's voice, a deadline approaching, a social situation that resembles past difficulties. And within milliseconds, before conscious thought even registers what is happening, the entire anxiety cascade begins. Thoughts race toward worst-case scenarios. Emotions surge with worry and apprehension. Muscles tense in preparation for threat. Breathing becomes shallow and rapid, and the nervous system shifts into high alert. This automated anxiety response operates like a well-rehearsed orchestra, performing a familiar symphony. Each component knows its part perfectly, entering at precisely the right moment, building to crescendos of distress with practiced efficiency. The worried thoughts know exactly which scenarios to generate. The emotions know precisely how intense to become. The body knows its choreography of tension and activation. The entire performance unfolds with unconscious precision, requiring no conscious direction or oversight. What makes these automatic patterns particularly persistent is their self-reinforcing nature. Each time the anxiety autopilot engages, it strengthens the neural pathways that support its operation. Like water flowing down a hillside, anxiety responses tend to follow the same channels repeatedly, carving those channels deeper with each pass until they become the default routes for emotional and physiological activation. The triggers that activate anxiety autopilot often bear only superficial resemblance to original threatening situations that established these patterns. A current work challenge might trigger automatic responses that were originally learned in response to childhood criticism. A relationship conflict might activate patterns that developed around early experiences of abandonment or rejection. The unconscious mind, in its effort to protect us from potential threats, generalizes from past experiences in ways that can make present situations feel dangerous even when they are objectively safe. These automatic patterns operate through what psychologists call associative networks, vast webs of connected memories, sensations, thoughts, and emotions that become linked through experience. When one element of the network becomes activated, it tends to activate related elements, often spreading activation throughout the entire network faster than conscious awareness can track. A particular smell might trigger memories of a stressful time, which activates associated emotions, which generate related bodily sensations, which confirm threatening thoughts, all within seconds of the initial trigger. The speed and efficiency of these automatic responses can make them feel like unchangeable features of personality or neurobiology, rather than learned patterns that develop through experience and can be modified through new learning. People often describe feeling hijacked by their own responses, as if they become passive observers of automatic patterns unfolding without their consent or control. This sense of helplessness becomes compounded by what researchers call experiential avoidance, the natural tendency to avoid, escape, or control unwanted internal experiences. When automatic anxiety responses feel overwhelming and uncontrollable, the mind naturally seeks ways to prevent or eliminate these experiences. But this avoidance often reinforces the very patterns it seeks to eliminate, as the nervous system learns to interpret the presence of anxiety symptoms as evidence that threat is real and urgent action is needed. The attempt to control automatic patterns through willpower alone rarely succeeds because these patterns operate through brain systems that are largely independent of conscious control. The same automaticity that makes them problematic also makes them resistant to direct conscious intervention. You cannot simply decide to stop an automatic response any more than you can consciously decide to stop your heart from beating or your stomach from digesting food. Yet recognizing the automatic nature of anxiety responses points toward more effective approaches for creating change. If these patterns operate below conscious awareness, then increasing conscious awareness becomes the foundation for transformation. If they function automatically, then learning to recognize their early stages creates opportunities for skillful intervention before they fully unfold. Mindfulness practice represents one of the most powerful approaches for interrupting automatic pilot and creating space for conscious choice. When we learn to observe our thoughts, emotions, and bodily sensations with non-judgmental awareness, we begin to recognize the early signs of automatic patterns engaging. This recognition creates what psychologists call cognitive flexibility, the ability to step back from automatic responses and choose different ways of thinking and behaving. The practice of mindful awareness does not eliminate automatic patterns overnight, but it gradually changes our relationship with them. Instead of being unconsciously hijacked by anxiety autopilot, we begin to recognize when these patterns are engaging. Instead of feeling like helpless victims of our own responses, we develop the capacity to witness automatic patterns unfolding and to intervene skillfully at choice points that appear throughout their development. Research in neuroscience has revealed that mindfulness practice literally changes brain structure and function in ways that support greater conscious control over automatic responses. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive functions like attention regulation and decision-making, becomes stronger and more active. The anterior cingulate cortex, which monitors for conflicts between automatic responses and conscious intentions, develops greater sensitivity and responsiveness. Meanwhile, the amygdala, which generates many automatic anxiety responses, becomes less reactive and more discriminating in its threat detection. The connections between the amygdala and prefrontal cortex strengthen, creating better communication between automatic emotional responses and conscious regulatory capacities. These neurological changes create the biological foundation for greater conscious choice and reduced automatic reactivity. Breaking free from automatic pilot requires patience, compassion, and consistent practice. Neural pathways that have been years or decades in the making do not change overnight, but every moment of conscious awareness, every recognition of automatic patterns, every skillful choice to respond differently than habitual conditioning would dictate, contributes to a fundamental rewiring that gradually shifts the balance from automatic reactivity toward conscious responsiveness. The goal is not to eliminate all automatic functioning, which serves essential purposes in daily life, but to restore conscious choice to areas where automatic patterns no longer serve our well-being. When anxiety autopilot no longer runs our emotional lives, when we can recognize and skillfully respond to triggers rather than being unconsciously hijacked by them, we reclaim our birthright of conscious choice and authentic response to life's challenges. This transformation from automatic reactivity to conscious responsiveness represents one of the most profound shifts possible in human experience. It is the difference between being a passenger in your own life and being the conscious driver, the difference between being trapped by conditioning and being free to choose your responses based on current reality and wise intention. Chapter 5. The Science of Inner Rebalancing. In the remarkable laboratories of neuroscience research centers around the world, a quiet revolution has been unfolding over the past several decades. Using sophisticated brain imaging technologies, researchers have been peering into the living brain, watching in real time as contemplative practices, mindfulness meditation, and conscious awareness literally reshape the neural architecture that underlies human experience. What they have discovered challenges fundamental assumptions about the fixed nature of adult brains and reveals extraordinary possibilities for healing, transformation, and the cultivation of inner peace. The discovery of neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to reorganize itself throughout life, represents one of the most significant paradigm shifts in neuroscience history. For much of the 20th century, scientists believed that adult brains were essentially fixed structures, unable to generate new neurons or create new connections after critical developmental periods in childhood and adolescence. This view suggested that neural patterns established early in life, including those that predispose toward anxiety and emotional reactivity, were permanent features that could be managed but never fundamentally changed. But beginning in the 1990s, research began revealing a very different picture. Adult brains, it turned out, remain remarkably malleable throughout life, constantly generating new neurons, forming new connections, and reorganizing existing circuits based on experience and practice. Every thought we think, every emotion we feel, every action we take literally changes the physical structure of our brains, strengthening some neural pathways while allowing others to weaken through disuse. This discovery has profound implications for understanding and treating anxiety. The same neural plasticity that allows anxiety patterns to become entrenched also enables the development of new patterns characterized by calm, resilience, and emotional balance. The brain that learned to generate anxiety responses can learn to generate responses of peace and stability instead. One of the most intensively studied examples of neuroplasticity involves research on meditation and mindfulness practices. In landmark studies conducted at Harvard Medical School, Massachusetts General Hospital, and other prestigious research institutions, neuroscientists have documented specific changes in brain structure and function that occur after just 8 weeks of mindfulness meditation training. Using magnetic resonance imaging technology, researchers found that regular meditation practice increases cortical thickness in regions associated with attention, sensory processing, and emotional regulation. The prefrontal cortex, crucial for executive functions like planning, decision-making, and emotional regulation, shows increased gray matter density, and enhanced connectivity with other brain regions. The anterior cingulate cortex, which plays key roles in attention regulation and conflict monitoring, demonstrates greater activation and improved functional efficiency. Perhaps most remarkably for anxiety sufferers, meditation practice has been shown to actually shrink the amygdala, the brain's primary threat detection center. After 8 weeks of mindfulness training, participants showed measurable reductions in amygdala volume along with decreased reactivity to stressful stimuli. The amygdala not only became smaller, but also less sensitive, requiring more significant triggers to activate stress responses and returning to baseline more quickly after activation. Simultaneously, meditation strengthens connections between the prefrontal cortex and limbic regions, creating better top-down regulation of emotional responses. This enhanced prefrontal limbic connectivity allows rational thinking processes to more effectively modulate automatic emotional reactions, creating greater emotional stability and resilience in challenging situations. The hippocampus, crucial for memory formation and learning, also shows positive changes with meditation practice. Increased gray matter density in hippocampal regions correlates with improved learning capacity, better memory function, and enhanced ability to distinguish between past experiences and current reality. This latter function proves particularly important for anxiety, as many anxious responses involve unconscious confusion between past threats and current situations. Research has also revealed meditation's effects on the default mode network, a set of brain regions that become active during rest and introspective activities. In anxiety disorders, the default mode network often becomes dominated by worry, rumination, and anxious planning for hypothetical future scenarios. Meditation practice helps restore healthier default mode network functioning, with resting brain states characterized by peaceful awareness rather than anxious preoccupation. The insula, a brain region, crucial for interoceptive awareness, the ability to sense internal bodily states, shows increased thickness and enhanced function with mindfulness training. This improved interoceptive sensitivity allows practitioners to recognize early signs of stress activation and intervene before anxiety responses fully develop. Enhanced body awareness also facilitates the development of self-regulation skills based on accurate perception of internal states. Studies using functional magnetic resonance imaging have revealed that meditation practice changes patterns of brain connectivity in ways that support emotional regulation and stress resilience. The anterior cingulate cortex develops stronger connections with attention-regulating networks, while reducing excessive connectivity with threat detection systems. The prefrontal cortex shows enhanced communication with reward processing areas while demonstrating better inhibitory control over fear-generating regions. These neurobiological changes translate directly into measurable improvements in psychological well-being. Research participants who complete mindfulness-based stress reduction programs show significant reductions in anxiety, depression, and perceived stress levels. They demonstrate improved emotional regulation, enhanced attention stability, better sleep quality, and increased overall life satisfaction. Longitudinal studies reveal that these benefits persist and often continue expanding long after formal training periods end. The neural changes initiated during intensive practice periods appear to create positive feedback loops that support continued growth in emotional regulation and stress resilience. Practitioners develop what researchers call trait-level changes, stable modifications in baseline neural functioning that influence responses across all life situations. The autonomic nervous system also shows remarkable plasticity in response to contemplative practices. Heart rate variability, a measure of the balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system activation, improves significantly with meditation training. Cortisol levels, a primary stress hormone, decrease both during practice sessions and throughout daily life. Inflammatory markers associated with chronic stress show measurable reductions. Breathing-based practices demonstrate particularly powerful effects on nervous system regulation. Specific breathing techniques can rapidly shift autonomic balance from sympathetic dominance toward parasympathetic activation, creating immediate feelings of calm and relaxation. With regular practice, these acute effects begin creating more lasting changes in baseline nervous system functioning. The vagus nerve, which connects the brainstem to major organs throughout the body and plays crucial roles in parasympathetic activation, shows enhanced functioning with contemplative practices. Increased vagal tone correlates with improved emotional regulation, better stress resilience, enhanced immune function, and greater overall health and well-being. Research on loving-kindness meditation and compassion-based practices reveals additional neurobiological benefits specifically relevant to anxiety treatment. These practices strengthen neural networks associated with positive emotions, while reducing activity in regions linked to threat detection and defensive responding. Practitioners develop enhanced capacities for self-compassion, emotional warmth, and resilience in the face of criticism or rejection. Body-based contemplative practices like yoga, tai chi, and qigong demonstrate complementary neurobiological effects. These practices enhance proprioceptive awareness, improve coordination between different brain regions, and strengthen connections between motor, sensory, and emotional processing areas. The integration of movement, breath, and awareness creates particularly robust changes in stress resilience and emotional regulation. Perhaps most importantly for anxiety treatment, research reveals that relatively brief interventions can initiate significant neurobiological changes, while longer and more intensive practice periods create more dramatic transformations. Even modest commitments to daily mindfulness practice begin reshaping brain structure and function within weeks. Studies show measurable improvements in anxiety symptoms after as little as 8 sessions of mindfulness training. The implications of this research extend far beyond anxiety treatment to fundamental questions about human potential and the nature of well-being. If conscious practices can literally rewire the neural circuits that generate emotional experience, then suffering is not a fixed feature of human existence, but a modifiable pattern that can be transformed through skillful means. This scientific understanding provides a solid foundation for engaging wholeheartedly with contemplative practices, not as New Age wishful thinking, but as evidence-based interventions supported by rigorous research. The ancient wisdom traditions that developed these practices over millennia are now validated by modern neuroscience, creating unprecedented opportunities for scientifically informed approaches to spiritual and psychological development. The journey of inner rebalancing is not merely a psychological or spiritual undertaking, but a biological transformation that creates lasting changes in the neural foundations of experience itself. Every moment of mindful awareness, every conscious breath, every practice that brings the nervous system into balance contributes to a fundamental rewiring that moves us from patterns of reactivity toward patterns of resilience, from anxiety toward authentic peace. Quiet the storm within, rewire your anxiety, and focus the mind through awareness, choice, and inner rebalancing. Chapter 6. The Power of Present Moment Awareness. In a world that seems designed to scatter attention across multiple streams of information, past regrets, and future anxieties, the simple act of being present represents both a radical departure from cultural conditioning and a return to our most fundamental nature. Present moment awareness is not merely a pleasant state of consciousness or a temporary escape from life's pressures. It is the very foundation upon which lasting transformation becomes possible. When we learn to anchor our attention in the immediacy of current experience, we discover that the vast majority of our anxiety exists only in the realm of imagination, projected into hypothetical futures or dragged forward from remembered pasts. The present moment is the only place where life actually occurs. It is the only temporal location where we have any real power to influence our circumstances, make conscious choices, or experience genuine well-being. Yet for many people, particularly those struggling with anxiety, the present moment has become a foreign territory, visited only briefly between extended sojourns into mental time travel that rarely serves their actual well-being. Anxiety, by definition, is primarily a future-oriented phenomenon. The word itself derives from the Latin angia, meaning to choke or strangle, reflecting how worry about future possibilities can constrict our experience of current reality. While appropriate concern about genuinely likely future challenges serves important planning and preparation functions, anxiety typically involves elaborate mental scenarios about possibilities that are either extremely unlikely or completely beyond our control. When we examine anxiety carefully through the lens of present moment awareness, we often discover that the actual facts of our current situation are quite different from the stories our minds tell about those facts. Right now, as you read these words, notice what is actually happening in your immediate experience. Are you physically safe? Are your basic needs being met? Is there anything requiring urgent attention or action in this very moment? For most people, most of the time, the honest answer is that the present moment contains far less drama and threat than the narratives generated by anxious thinking. This is not to minimize genuine challenges or to suggest that all concerns are unfounded, but rather to highlight how rarely current reality justifies the level of distress that anxiety can generate about hypothetical futures. Present moment awareness reveals anxiety for what it truly is, a mental construction that exists primarily in the realm of thought and imagination. When we learn to distinguish between the stories our minds tell and the actual facts of current experience, we begin to see through anxiety's apparent solidity and discover that it has no more substantial reality than a mirage shimmering on hot pavement. The cultivation of present moment awareness represents one of humanity's oldest and most effective approaches to mental and emotional well-being. Contemplative traditions from around the world have developed sophisticated practices for training attention to rest stably in immediate experience, recognizing that this capacity serves as the foundation for wisdom, compassion, and authentic peace. Modern neuroscience has revealed the specific mechanisms through which present moment awareness creates its beneficial effects. When attention becomes anchored in immediate sensory experience, brain activity shifts away from the default mode network regions associated with worry and rumination, toward networks associated with direct perception and calm alertness. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for executive control and emotional regulation, shows enhanced activation and improved connectivity with other brain regions. The practice of mindfulness, which can be defined simply as non-judgmental awareness of present moment experience, provides a systematic approach to developing this crucial capacity. Unlike concentration practices that focus attention on a single object, mindfulness involves opening awareness to whatever is arising in current experience, while maintaining a stance of curious, accepting observation. The breath serves as perhaps the most accessible and reliable anchor for present moment awareness. Breathing is always happening now, never in the past or future. It provides a continuous stream of sensation that can serve as a home base for attention when the mind begins wandering into anxious territory. The breath also offers direct access to nervous system regulation, as conscious breathing practices can rapidly shift autonomic balance from sympathetic arousal toward parasympathetic calm. When we pay attention to breathing, we are not trying to change or control it, but simply to notice its natural rhythm and qualities. Is the breath shallow or deep? Fast or slow? Smooth or irregular? These observations provide valuable information about current nervous system states, while simultaneously anchoring awareness in immediate bodily experience rather than mental narrative. Body awareness represents another powerful pathway into present moment experience. The body is always in the present, never existing anywhere but here and now. Anxiety often involves a subtle dissociation from bodily experience, a retreat into mental commentary that loses touch with the grounding influence of physical sensation. Returning attention to bodily experience provides an immediate refuge from mental time travel. Progressive body scanning, where attention moves systematically through different regions of the body, reveals how much information is available through direct physical awareness. Notice the weight of your body against whatever is supporting you. Feel the temperature of the air on your skin. Sense the position of your arms and legs, the state of tension or relaxation in various muscle groups, any areas of comfort or discomfort that might be present. This practice of embodied awareness serves multiple functions in anxiety recovery. It provides immediate grounding when thoughts begin spiraling into worried scenarios. It offers early warning signs of stress activation that can prompt skillful intervention before anxiety fully develops. It reconnects us with the body's own wisdom and healing intelligence. Most importantly, it demonstrates experientially that we can shift our attention away from anxious thinking toward direct, immediate experience. Sensory awareness practices expand this foundation by engaging with the full spectrum of immediate experience. What sounds are present in your environment right now? What visual information is available if you look around mindfully? Are there any tastes or smells that you can detect? This multi-sensory engagement with immediate experience creates a rich field of present moment awareness that leaves little room for anxiety-generating mental elaboration. The development of present moment awareness requires gentle persistence rather than forceful effort. The mind's tendency to wander into past and future is not a problem to be eliminated, but a natural function that can be worked with skillfully. When you notice that attention has drifted into anxious thinking, simply acknowledge this wandering with kindness and gently return attention to immediate experience. This process of noticing and returning is not a failure, but the actual practice of mindfulness. Each time we notice mind wandering and return to present moment awareness, we strengthen neural pathways associated with attention regulation, while weakening the automatic patterns that support anxious rumination. Neuroscientist Richard Davidson's research has shown that even brief periods of mindfulness practice create measurable changes in brain function, with increased activity in regions associated with positive emotions and decreased activity in areas linked to anxiety and stress. Present moment awareness also reveals the impermanent nature of all mental and emotional states. When we observe anxiety carefully as it arises, persists, and eventually dissolves, we begin to see that even the most intense anxious episodes are temporary phenomena that pass through awareness like clouds moving across the sky. This recognition reduces anxiety's apparent power and helps develop confidence that difficult states will naturally resolve without requiring urgent intervention. The practice becomes particularly powerful when we learn to observe thoughts themselves as objects arising in present moment awareness, rather than truths about reality that require our complete attention and belief. When an anxious thought appears, instead of immediately engaging with its content and following its narrative implications, we can simply notice anxious thinking is arising. This creates space between our essential awareness and the temporary mental events that pass through it. Emotional awareness represents another crucial dimension of present moment practice. Emotions, like breath and bodily sensations, exist only in the present moment. When we learn to feel emotions directly, without immediately creating stories about their causes or implications, we discover that they are temporary energy patterns that arise, persist briefly, and naturally dissolve when not fed by mental elaboration. Anxiety, when felt directly in the body, rather than elaborated through worried thinking, often reveals itself as combinations of physical sensations. Tightness in the chest, butterflies in the stomach, tension in the shoulders, rapid heartbeat. These sensations, while potentially uncomfortable, are far less overwhelming than the mental narratives that typically accompany them. When we learn to feel anxiety as bodily sensation rather than believing the stories it generates, it loses much of its apparent power and urgency. Environmental awareness provides additional support for present moment stability. Noticing natural elements like sunlight, fresh air, plants, or water can serve as immediate anchors in immediate reality. The nervous system naturally relaxes in the presence of natural beauty and complexity, shifting away from threat detection mode toward appreciation and calm alertness. The cultivation of present moment awareness is not about achieving some special state of consciousness or eliminating all thoughts and emotions. It is about developing a stable, friendly relationship with whatever is actually happening right now, without the additional layer of mental commentary that typically amplifies distress. When we can rest in immediate experience with acceptance and curiosity, we discover that the present moment contains its own natural peace that anxiety cannot touch. This peace is not dependent on external circumstances being perfect or internal experiences being pleasant. It is the fundamental peace of awareness itself, the calm center that remains stable regardless of what thoughts, emotions, or sensations might be arising within its spacious embrace. Discovering this ever-present peace represents one of the most profound gifts that present moment awareness can offer, revealing that what we seek is always already here, waiting to be recognized in the simple immediacy of this moment. Chapter 7. Cognitive Reappraisal. Changing the Story. Within the vast library of human consciousness lies one of our species' most remarkable capacities, the ability to interpret, reframe, and transform the meaning we assign to our experiences. This cognitive flexibility, which allows us to see situations from multiple perspectives and choose interpretations that serve our well-being, represents one of the most powerful tools available for anxiety transformation. Cognitive reappraisal, as this capacity is known in psychological research, offers a bridge between automatic anxious interpretations and conscious choice about how we understand and respond to life's challenges. Every experience we encounter passes through complex interpretive processes before reaching conscious awareness. Raw sensory data from our environment gets filtered through personal history, cultural conditioning, learned associations, and current emotional states to create the subjective reality we experience as what is happening. This interpretive process occurs so rapidly and automatically that we rarely recognize the difference between events themselves and our mental constructions about those events. Anxiety disorders involve systematic distortions in these interpretive processes, creating what cognitive psychologists call cognitive biases that consistently skew perception toward threatening interpretations. The same ambiguous social interaction that a calm person might interpret as neutral or mildly positive can be processed by an anxious mind as evidence of rejection, criticism, or impending social catastrophe. These biased interpretations feel completely real and accurate to the person experiencing them, making anxiety's distorted thinking particularly insidious. When someone interprets a colleague's brief email response as evidence of professional disapproval, the emotional and physiological responses that follow are based on that interpretation, regardless of whether it accurately reflects the colleague's actual intentions or feelings. Cognitive reappraisal involves learning to recognize these automatic interpretations as mental constructions rather than objective facts, and then consciously choosing more balanced, realistic, and helpful ways of understanding challenging situations. This is not about positive thinking or denial of genuine problems, but about developing the ability to see situations more clearly, free from the distorting influences of anxiety-driven cognitive biases. The first step in cognitive reappraisal involves developing what psychologists call cognitive awareness, the ability to observe your own thinking processes as they unfold. This metacognitive capacity allows you to step back from automatic interpretations and recognize them as mental events rather than accurate descriptions of reality. When you notice thoughts like, "Everyone thinks I'm incompetent," or "This presentation will be a complete disaster," cognitive awareness allows you to recognize these as interpretations rather than facts. Research in cognitive neuroscience has revealed the specific brain mechanisms involved in cognitive reappraisal. When we consciously reframe our interpretations of challenging situations, the prefrontal cortex becomes more active, while the amygdala's threat responses become dampened. This neurobiological shift corresponds to the subjective experience of feeling more calm, balanced, and capable of responding wisely rather than reacting automatically. Effective cognitive reappraisal involves several key components that work together to create more balanced and realistic thinking patterns. The first involves learning to identify cognitive distortions, systematic errors in thinking that consistently bias interpretation toward negative or threatening outcomes. These distortions, originally catalogued by cognitive therapy pioneers, represent common patterns that appear across different anxiety disorders and individuals. Catastrophizing involves imagining the worst possible outcomes and treating them as likely or inevitable. A person who catastrophizes might interpret a supervisor's request for a meeting as definitive evidence that termination is imminent, despite having no objective information to support this conclusion. The catastrophizing mind jumps from possibility to probability to certainty in a matter of seconds, creating intense anxiety about outcomes that may never materialize. All or nothing thinking involves viewing situations in absolute terms, with no middle ground between perfect success and complete failure. Someone engaged in all or nothing thinking might interpret a single social awkwardness as evidence of being completely socially incompetent, ignoring all contrary evidence of successful social interactions. Mind reading involves assuming knowledge of other people's thoughts and feelings without any direct evidence. An anxious person might interpret someone's distracted behavior as proof of personal dislike, without considering alternative explanations like the other person being preoccupied with their own concerns. Fortune-telling involves predicting negative future outcomes with certainty, despite having no reliable way to know what will actually happen. Someone engaged in fortune-telling might feel certain that an upcoming presentation will be humiliating, that a relationship conflict will lead to permanent damage, or that current financial pressures will inevitably lead to complete ruin. Recognizing these distortions as they occur creates opportunities for conscious reappraisal. When you notice catastrophic thinking, you can ask yourself, what evidence do I actually have that this worst-case scenario is likely. What are some other possible outcomes? How have similar situations actually turned out in the past? These questions help restore realistic perspective and reduce anxiety's distorting influence on perception. Effective reappraisal also involves developing what researchers call alternative explanation skills, the ability to generate multiple plausible interpretations for ambiguous situations. When someone doesn't respond to a text message immediately, instead of automatically assuming it indicates anger or rejection, alternative explanations might include being busy, not seeing the message, dealing with personal issues, or simply not having anything particular to say at the moment. The goal of generating alternative explanations is not to convince yourself that the most positive interpretation is necessarily true, but to recognize that multiple interpretations are possible, and that automatically choosing the most threatening one is neither accurate nor helpful. This process restores choice to interpretation, allowing conscious decision-making about which perspective serves your well-being and responds most appropriately to available evidence. Perspective taking represents another crucial component of cognitive reappraisal. Anxiety often creates tunnel vision that focuses exclusively on potential threats, while ignoring broader context that might provide balance and reassurance. Consciously expanding perspective can reveal information that anxiety-focused attention systematically overlooks. Temporal perspective involves considering how current concerns will matter across different timescales. A presentation that feels catastrophically important today will likely seem much less significant next month or next year. Relationship conflicts that feel earth-shattering in the moment often resolve naturally with time and communication. Financial pressures that create intense anxiety today may be resolved through various means that are not currently visible. Social perspective involves considering how situations might appear to other people, particularly those not caught up in your current emotional state. A friend observing your situation might see strengths, resources, and options that anxiety renders invisible to you. They might interpret ambiguous social cues very differently than your anxious mind does. Historical perspective involves remembering how similar challenges have been navigated successfully in the past. The human tendency to forget previous successes while vividly remembering failures can create the illusion that current challenges are uniquely difficult or that you lack the resources to handle them effectively. Evidence-based reappraisal involves systematically examining the actual evidence for and against anxious interpretations, like a scientist testing hypotheses rather than a prosecutor building cases. When anxiety suggests that disaster is imminent, evidence-based thinking asks, what concrete facts support this conclusion? What evidence contradicts it? What would I need to see to know whether this interpretation is accurate? This process often reveals that anxious interpretations are based on very little actual evidence while ignoring substantial contrary information. Someone convinced that their relationship is failing might discover, when examining evidence objectively, that the relationship has far more indicators of health and stability than signs of distress. Probability assessment represents another crucial reappraisal skill. Anxiety systematically overestimates the likelihood of negative outcomes while underestimating both positive possibilities and our capacity to handle difficulties. Learning to make realistic probability assessments helps restore balance to decision-making and reduces unnecessary worry about unlikely events. This might involve researching actual statistics about feared outcomes, consulting with knowledgeable others, or simply noting the difference between possibility and probability. While it is possible that an upcoming medical test will reveal serious illness, the actual probability might be quite low based on current symptoms and medical history. Recognizing this distinction allows appropriate preparation without excessive anxiety. Self-compassion integration represents perhaps the most important aspect of cognitive reappraisal. Many anxious interpretations involve harsh self-judgment and criticism that would never be directed toward a good friend facing similar challenges. Learning to speak to yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a loved one creates space for more balanced and helpful perspectives. Instead of interpreting a mistake as evidence of fundamental inadequacy, self-compassionate reappraisal might recognize it as a normal part of learning and growth. Instead of viewing anxiety symptoms as personal failures, compassionate perspective might see them as understandable responses to stress that deserve care and attention rather than criticism. Regular practice of cognitive reappraisal gradually rewires the neural pathways that support automatic interpretation, creating new default patterns characterized by balance, realism, and flexibility rather than bias, distortion, and rigidity. Research shows that even brief interventions in cognitive reappraisal can create lasting improvements in anxiety symptoms and emotional regulation. The transformation occurs not through forced positive thinking, but through the development of cognitive flexibility that allows conscious choice about interpretive frameworks. When you no longer feel trapped by automatic anxious interpretations, when you can recognize and question cognitive distortions as they arise, when you can generate alternative perspectives that serve your well-being, you reclaim one of your most fundamental human capacities: the power to choose how you understand your experience and respond to life's inevitable challenges. Chapter 8. Somatic Integration. Healing through the body. Beneath the surface of conscious thought and deliberate mental strategies lies the vast intelligence of the human body, a sophisticated system of awareness, regulation, and healing that has been operating successfully for millions of years before the development of complex thinking. This embodied wisdom represents one of the most powerful yet underutilized resources for anxiety transformation, offering pathways to regulation and peace that bypass the thinking mind entirely and work directly with the nervous system's own capacity for balance and restoration. Traditional approaches to anxiety treatment often focus primarily on thoughts and beliefs, assuming that changing thinking patterns will automatically create changes in emotional and physical experience. While cognitive approaches offer valuable tools, they sometimes overlook the fundamental reality that anxiety is not simply a mental phenomenon, but a whole-body experience involving complex interactions between nervous system states, muscular patterns, breathing rhythms, hormonal fluctuations, and countless other physiological processes. Somatic integration recognizes the body as an intelligent partner in healing, rather than merely a passive vessel for mental and emotional experience. This approach works directly with physical sensations, movement patterns, breathing rhythms, and nervous system states to create changes that naturally support emotional regulation and mental clarity. When the body feels safe and regulated, the mind naturally relaxes into greater peace and stability. The autonomic nervous system serves as the primary interface between psychological experience and physical reality, constantly adjusting physiological functioning based on perceived levels of safety or threat. This system operates primarily through unconscious pathways, making automatic adjustments to heart rate, breathing patterns, muscle tension, digestive processes, and countless other functions based on environmental cues and internal states. In chronic anxiety, the autonomic nervous system often becomes locked into patterns of sympathetic activation or protective shutdown that no longer serve current circumstances. These patterns may have developed as appropriate responses to past stressors, but continue operating automatically, creating ongoing states of physiological dysregulation that manifest as anxiety symptoms. Somatic approaches work directly with these physiological patterns, using specific practices to help the nervous system remember its natural capacity for regulation and balance. Rather than trying to think your way into different body states, somatic practices invite the body to directly experience safety, calm, and groundedness through immediate physical engagement. Breathing practices represent perhaps the most accessible and powerful somatic interventions for anxiety. Breathing serves as a bridge between conscious and unconscious, voluntary and involuntary, mental and physical. While breathing happens automatically, we can also consciously influence breathing patterns, making breath a unique gateway for direct nervous system regulation. Anxiety often creates specific breathing patterns that maintain the body in states of subtle activation. Shallow, rapid, upper chest breathing sends constant signals to the brain that threat is present and vigilance is required. These breathing patterns can persist long after original stresses have passed, maintaining chronic anxiety through unconscious physiological channels. Conscious breathing practices can rapidly shift nervous system states from sympathetic arousal toward parasympathetic calm. Specific techniques like extended exhalation, diaphragmatic breathing, and rhythmic breathing patterns directly stimulate the vagus nerve, the primary pathway for parasympathetic activation that promotes rest, restoration, and emotional regulation. The 4-7-8 breathing technique offers one particularly effective approach for direct nervous system regulation. This practice involves inhaling through the nose for 4 counts, holding the breath for 7 counts, and exhaling completely through the mouth for 8 counts. The extended exhalation activates parasympathetic responses while the rhythmic counting provides a focal point that anchors attention in immediate experience. Diaphragmatic breathing retrains natural breathing patterns that may have become shallow and restricted through chronic stress. This practice involves breathing deeply into the belly rather than the upper chest, allowing the diaphragm to move freely and fully. Place one hand on your chest and another on your belly, breathing in a way that moves the lower hand while keeping the upper hand relatively still. Box breathing creates rhythmic regulation through equal phases of inhalation, retention, exhalation, and retention, each lasting the same duration. This practice, used by military personnel and first responders to maintain calm under pressure, creates immediate nervous system regulation, while training greater respiratory flexibility and control. Body awareness practices provide another pathway for somatic integration, helping develop intimate familiarity with physical sensations and their connection to emotional states. Many people with anxiety have learned to disconnect from bodily experience, viewing physical sensations as threatening or overwhelming rather than as sources of valuable information and guidance. Progressive muscle relaxation systematically releases physical tension while teaching discrimination between states of tension and relaxation. This practice involves deliberately tensing specific muscle groups for several seconds and then completely releasing the tension, noting the contrast between these states. Moving through the entire body in this way creates both physical relief and enhanced body awareness. Body scanning develops what researchers call interoceptive awareness, the capacity to sense internal bodily states accurately and sensitively. This practice involves moving attention systematically through different regions of the body, noting whatever sensations are present without trying to change anything. Simple awareness often initiates natural relaxation and regulation processes without any forced effort or intervention. Movement practices offer particularly powerful approaches to somatic integration because they engage the body's natural wisdom for regulation and expression. Trauma and chronic stress often create patterns of holding, bracing, and restriction that limit natural movement and maintain dysregulation. Gentle movement practices can help restore natural flow and flexibility while releasing stored tension. Shaking and trembling represent natural mechanisms that mammals use to discharge excess arousal after threatening situations. Wild animals naturally shake after escaping predators, allowing their nervous systems to return to baseline rather than maintaining chronic activation. Humans can consciously engage this natural process through gentle shaking practices that allow the body to release stored stress and tension. Dance and free-form movement provide opportunities for authentic self-expression while engaging the body's natural capacity for joy and aliveness. Movement to music naturally shifts nervous system states, often creating immediate improvements in mood and energy that bypass cognitive processes entirely. Even simple movements like swaying, stretching, or gentle bouncing can create significant shifts in physiological states. Yoga represents a sophisticated system for somatic integration that combines movement, breath awareness, and meditative attention in practices specifically designed to promote nervous system regulation and emotional balance. Research has consistently shown yoga's effectiveness for anxiety reduction, with benefits that extend far beyond the duration of practice sessions. Grounding practices help establish felt sense of safety and stability through direct connection with physical reality. These practices are particularly valuable during acute anxiety when the nervous system needs immediate reassurance and regulation. Feeling the weight of your body against the ground, pressing your feet firmly into the floor, or hugging yourself gently can provide instant grounding during moments of distress. Cold exposure, through practices like cold showers, ice baths, or simply splashing cold water on the face, provides direct nervous system training that builds resilience and reduces reactivity. Controlled exposure to mild stress through cold temperatures teaches the nervous system that it can handle challenging sensations while maintaining regulation and conscious choice. Touch and self-massage offer powerful pathways for soothing and regulation. The skin contains vast networks of nerve endings that communicate directly with the nervous system's regulation centers. Gentle self-touch, such as placing a hand on the heart or stroking the arms slowly and mindfully, can activate attachment and bonding neurobiology that promotes feelings of safety and calm. Sleep hygiene represents a crucial but often overlooked aspect of somatic integration. Quality sleep provides the foundation for nervous system regulation, immune function, and emotional stability. Creating consistent sleep routines, optimizing sleep environments, and addressing sleep-disrupting habits can dramatically improve anxiety symptoms by supporting the body's natural restoration processes. Nutrition also plays significant roles in nervous system function and emotional regulation. Blood sugar fluctuations, caffeine sensitivity, and nutritional deficiencies can all contribute to anxiety symptoms through direct physiological pathways. Stable blood sugar levels, adequate hydration, and nutrients that support nervous system function create the biochemical foundation for emotional stability. The integration of somatic practices requires patience and gentleness, as the body often needs time to remember its natural capacity for regulation after periods of chronic stress. Unlike mental interventions that can create rapid cognitive shifts, somatic changes often unfold gradually as the nervous system learns to trust new patterns of safety and regulation. Regular engagement with somatic practices gradually creates what researchers call embodied resilience, a stable sense of groundedness and regulation that persists across various life challenges. When the body remembers how to relax, how to breathe freely, how to move with natural grace, and how to regulate its own arousal levels, anxiety loses much of its power because its physiological foundations are no longer available to support its manifestation. The body that has learned to live in chronic anxiety can learn to live in natural peace. The nervous system that has been trapped in dysregulation can remember its birthright of balance and ease. Through patient, kind engagement with somatic practices, we can restore the body to its natural wisdom while discovering that the peace we seek is already present, waiting to be uncovered in the simple immediacy of embodied aliveness. Chapter 9. Creating your personal regulation toolkit. The journey from anxiety to authentic peace requires more than understanding concepts or learning techniques in isolation. Lasting transformation emerges through the patient cultivation of a personalized collection of practices, skills, and resources that become readily available in moments of need. Creating your personal regulation toolkit involves identifying which approaches work most effectively for your unique nervous system, lifestyle, and circumstances, then developing the consistency and skill to implement these tools when they are needed most. Every individual's nervous system has its own patterns, preferences, and responses to different interventions. What creates profound calm for one person might feel neutral or even agitating for another. The practices that work beautifully in quiet environments might need modification for busy workplaces or social situations. Building an effective regulation toolkit requires careful experimentation, honest assessment, and ongoing refinement based on direct experience rather than theoretical ideals. The foundation of any effective toolkit begins with acute regulation strategies, practices that can rapidly shift nervous system states during moments of heightened anxiety or stress. These interventions need to be simple enough to remember and implement when thinking clearly becomes difficult, accessible enough to use in various environments, and powerful enough to create meaningful change in activated nervous system states. Breathing-based interventions often serve as the cornerstone of acute regulation because breath is always available, requires no equipment, can be practiced anywhere, and directly influences nervous system functioning. However, the specific breathing practices that work best can vary significantly between individuals. Some people respond well to extended exhales that activate parasympathetic responses, while others find rhythmic breathing patterns more regulating. The 47-8 technique provides one reliable option: inhaling for 4 counts, holding for 7, and exhaling for 8. This pattern naturally slows breathing rate while creating a calming rhythm that can interrupt anxious spirals. The counting component also provides a focal point for attention that can redirect mental energy away from worried thinking. Physiological sighing offers another powerful acute intervention based on recent neuroscience research. This practice involves a double inhale through the nose followed by a long exhale through the mouth. The double inhale maximally inflates air sacs in the lungs, while the extended exhale activates parasympathetic responses, creating rapid nervous system regulation. Box breathing provides structured regulation through equal phases of inhalation, retention, exhalation, and retention. Starting with 4 counts for each phase and gradually extending to 6 or 8 counts creates progressively deeper regulation, while building respiratory resilience. This technique works particularly well for people who prefer structured, systematic approaches. Grounding practices serve as another essential category of acute interventions, helping establish immediate connection with physical reality when anxiety creates feelings of disconnection or unreality. The 5-4-3-2-1 technique engages multiple senses simultaneously, identifying 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. Physical grounding might involve feeling your feet firmly planted on the ground, pressing your hands together with moderate pressure, or hugging yourself gently. These practices work by activating proprioceptive awareness, your sense of body position, and physical boundaries, which naturally calms the nervous system and creates felt sense of safety. Movement-based acute interventions can rapidly shift stuck energy and provide immediate relief from anxious activation. Simple practices like shoulder rolls, neck stretches, or gentle bouncing on the balls of your feet can release physical tension while engaging the body's natural capacity for self-regulation. Even subtle movements like wiggling fingers and toes can create nervous system shifts when more obvious movement isn't practical. Beyond acute interventions, effective regulation toolkits include daily maintenance practices that gradually build nervous system resilience and reduce baseline anxiety levels over time. These practices work preventively rather than reactively, creating conditions that make acute anxiety episodes less likely, while building the physiological foundation for sustained well-being. Morning routines that prioritize nervous system regulation can set positive tones for entire days. This might include meditation or mindfulness practice, gentle movement or stretching, intentional breathing, or simply spending a few minutes in natural light. The specific elements matter less than consistency and the intention to begin each day by nurturing your nervous system rather than immediately engaging with stressful demands. Regular exercise provides one of the most powerful interventions for anxiety management, literally metabolizing stress hormones while promoting the release of mood-regulating neurotransmitters. The form of exercise matters less than consistency and enjoyment. Walking, swimming, dancing, weightlifting, or yoga can all provide significant benefits when practiced regularly. Sleep optimization represents another crucial component of daily maintenance. Quality sleep provides the foundation for nervous system regulation, emotional stability, and cognitive clarity. This involves not only adequate sleep duration, but also consistent sleep and wake times, optimized sleep environments, and evening routines that support natural transition into rest. Mindfulness meditation, even in brief daily doses, creates cumulative changes in brain structure and function that support emotional regulation and stress resilience. Starting with just 5 or 10 minutes daily, and gradually extending duration as comfort develops, can create profound changes over time. The key is consistency rather than duration. Regular brief practices often prove more beneficial than occasional lengthy sessions. Cognitive regulation tools provide another essential category of interventions, offering ways to work skillfully with anxious thoughts and interpretations when they arise. These tools become most effective when developed through regular practice during calm moments rather than learning them for the first time during acute anxiety. Thought labeling involves recognizing anxious thoughts as mental events rather than accurate descriptions of reality. Simple phrases like anxiety thinking, worry thoughts, or fear stories can create distance from automatic mental narratives while reducing their emotional impact. Evidence examination involves systematically evaluating the actual evidence for and against anxious interpretations. When anxiety suggests disaster is imminent, evidence-based thinking asks, what concrete facts support this conclusion, versus what evidence contradicts it? Perspective-widening practices help restore balance to anxiety's naturally narrow focus. This might involve asking how the current situation will matter in 5 years, how a supportive friend might view the circumstances, or what personal strengths and resources are available that anxiety tends to overlook. Reframing techniques help generate more balanced interpretations of challenging situations. Instead of automatically assuming worst-case scenarios, conscious reframing asks what alternative explanations might be possible. and what opportunities for growth or learning might be available within current difficulties. Social regulation resources represent another vital component of comprehensive toolkits. Human nervous systems are naturally designed for co-regulation, the capacity to borrow calm and stability from others when our own systems feel overwhelmed. Identifying trustworthy people who can provide support during difficult times creates an external resource that complements internal regulation practices. This might involve having phone numbers readily available for supportive friends or family members, knowing which people in your life are particularly skilled at providing calm presence, or establishing ahead of time how you might reach out when support is needed. Professional resources like therapists, counselors, or support groups can provide additional layers of social regulation. Environmental regulation involves creating physical spaces and conditions that naturally support nervous system calm. This might include organizing living spaces to feel more peaceful, incorporating natural elements like plants or water features, optimizing lighting and air quality, or creating dedicated spaces for relaxation and restoration. Technology boundaries play increasingly important roles in nervous system regulation, as digital devices often provide constant sources of stimulation and stress. Creating specific times and spaces free from screens, limiting exposure to news and social media, and using technology mindfully rather than compulsively can significantly improve baseline anxiety levels. Nutrition-based regulation involves understanding how food choices influence mood, energy levels, and nervous system stability. Maintaining stable blood sugar through balanced meals, staying adequately hydrated, limiting caffeine intake, and addressing any nutritional deficiencies can provide physiological support for emotional regulation. The implementation of regulation toolkits requires strategic thinking about when and how different interventions will be most accessible and effective. Acute interventions need to be simple enough to remember and implement during stress, while daily practices need to fit realistically into existing schedules and routines. Creating cue cards or phone apps that remind you of key practices can help bridge the gap between knowing what works and actually implementing it during challenging moments. Practicing interventions during calm periods builds familiarity and skill that makes them more effective during times of need. Regular assessment and refinement ensure that your toolkit remains current and effective as circumstances change and skills develop. What works during one life phase might need modification as responsibilities shift or as you develop greater sensitivity and skill with various practices. The goal is not perfection, but rather the cultivation of a reliable collection of resources that support your nervous system's natural capacity for regulation and resilience. Over time, these practices become integrated into your natural way of being, creating a foundation of embodied wisdom that supports sustained well-being regardless of external circumstances. When you have trustworthy tools readily available, when you know how to shift your nervous system state when needed, when you have daily practices that build resilience over time, anxiety loses much of its power because you know that you have reliable resources for restoring balance and peace whenever they are needed. Chapter 10: Living from Center. The transformed life. As the practices deepen and the nervous system learns new patterns of regulation and response, a profound transformation begins to unfold that extends far beyond the mere absence of anxiety symptoms. Living from center represents a fundamental shift in how you relate to life's inevitable challenges, uncertainties, and stresses. Instead of being tossed about by every external circumstance or internal fluctuation, you begin to discover an unshakable core of stability that remains accessible regardless of what storms might be raging in the outer landscape of your experience. This transformation does not mean that difficult emotions never arise, or that life becomes free from challenges and uncertainty. Rather, it represents a fundamental change in your relationship to these experiences. When anxiety does arise, it is met with understanding rather than resistance, skillful response rather than automatic reactivity, and the confidence that comes from knowing you have reliable tools for restoring balance and perspective. The centered life emerges from the integration of all the practices and understandings we have explored. The neuroscientific insights that reveal the brain's remarkable capacity for change, the somatic awareness that connects you with your body's wisdom, the cognitive flexibility that frees you from automatic interpretations, and the present moment awareness that reveals the peace that is always available in immediate experience. Living from center begins with what contemplative traditions call equanimity, a balanced state of mind that remains stable in the face of changing circumstances. This quality does not involve emotional numbness or detached indifference, but rather a deep acceptance of the natural rhythms of experience coupled with the confidence that you can navigate whatever arises with wisdom and grace. Equanimity develops gradually as you learn to distinguish between pain and suffering, between genuine challenges and anxiety-generated catastrophizing, between what you can control and what lies beyond your influence. This discrimination creates freedom from the exhausting attempt to control outcomes while fully engaging with whatever responses are actually appropriate and helpful in current circumstances. The practices of mindfulness and somatic awareness gradually reveal what spiritual teachers call your essential nature, the conscious awareness that exists prior to and beyond all temporary thoughts, emotions, and sensations. This awareness, which some traditions call the witness or the observer self, provides a stable reference point that remains untouched by the fluctuations that anxiety mistakes for threats to your fundamental well-being. When you learn to identify with this essential awareness, rather than with temporary mental and emotional states, you discover a dimension of yourself that cannot be threatened by external circumstances or internal experiences. Anxiety may arise within this awareness, but it cannot contaminate or damage the awareness itself, any more than clouds can damage the sky through which they pass. This shift in identity from anxious person to conscious awareness observing anxiety creates profound relief and freedom. Instead of being anxiety, you recognize that you are the spacious awareness within which anxiety sometimes appears. This recognition naturally reduces anxiety's apparent power and urgency, while creating space for more skillful responses to whatever challenges might be present. The transformation also involves developing what psychologists call emotional granularity, the ability to distinguish between different emotional states and respond appropriately to each. Instead of experiencing a generalized sense of distress that gets labeled as anxiety, you begin to recognize the subtle differences between legitimate concern, excited anticipation, creative tension, and anxiety-driven worry. This emotional sophistication allows much more nuanced and effective responses to different internal states. Legitimate concern might call for practical problem-solving and preparation. Creative tension might be honored as a sign of growth and expansion. Excited anticipation might be celebrated as natural enthusiasm. Only anxiety-driven worry requires the specific interventions designed for nervous system regulation. Living from center also involves developing what researchers call psychological flexibility, the ability to adapt your responses based on current circumstances rather than relying on rigid patterns that may have worked in other contexts. This flexibility allows you to draw from your full range of capabilities and resources rather than being limited to anxiety-driven responses. When you can access calm presence, creative problem-solving, social connection, physical vitality, and emotional warmth as circumstances call for different qualities, you become infinitely more resourceful and effective in navigating life's complexities. Anxiety often creates a kind of tunnel vision that limits available responses to fight, flight, or freeze, but centered awareness has access to the full spectrum of human capabilities. The ripple effects of this transformation extend into every area of life. Relationships become more authentic and satisfying when you can show up with genuine presence rather than anxious preoccupation. Work becomes more creative and effective when mental energy is no longer consumed by worry and can be directed toward meaningful engagement. Decision-making becomes clearer when not clouded by catastrophic thinking and when you can access both rational analysis and intuitive wisdom. Physical health often improves dramatically as the chronic stress load of anxiety is reduced, and the nervous system returns to its natural balance. Sleep becomes more restorative, digestion improves, immune function strengthens, and energy levels stabilize when the body is no longer maintaining constant vigilance against imaginary threats. Perhaps most importantly, you begin to discover what genuine happiness and fulfillment feel like when they are not compromised by underlying anxiety. Many people who have lived with chronic anxiety for extended periods have forgotten what natural well-being feels like. As the nervous system heals and rebalances, authentic joy, curiosity, creativity, and aliveness naturally emerge. This is not the artificial happiness that comes from avoiding difficulties, or the temporary pleasure that depends on circumstances being perfect. This is the deep contentment that arises from being genuinely at peace with yourself and your experience, able to fully engage with both life's challenges and its gifts from a place of centered stability. The centered life also becomes naturally resilient in ways that anxiety-driven coping mechanisms never could provide. When your sense of well-being depends on external circumstances being perfect, you remain constantly vulnerable to the inevitable changes and uncertainties of life. But when your fundamental okayness comes from connection to your essential nature and confidence in your capacity to navigate whatever arises, you become genuinely unshakable. This resilience does not mean immunity to difficulty or the absence of emotional responses to challenging circumstances. Rather, it means that difficulties are met with appropriate responses rather than anxious reactivity, and that even intense emotional states are experienced within a larger context of stability and trust. Compassion naturally develops as a byproduct of this transformation. Having experienced your own struggles with anxiety and discovered pathways to healing, you naturally develop empathy for others who are still caught in patterns of suffering. This compassion extends both to others and to yourself, creating a foundation of kindness that supports continued growth and healing. The practices that initially served as interventions for anxiety symptoms gradually become expressions of your natural way of being. Mindfulness becomes not something you do, but something you are. Conscious breathing becomes as natural as walking. Body awareness becomes an integrated part of how you move through the world. Present moment awareness becomes your default state rather than a special technique. Maintaining this transformation requires ongoing engagement with the practices and principles that created it. The nervous system, like physical fitness, requires consistent support to maintain its health and resilience. Daily practices that seemed crucial during acute healing phases continue to serve important maintenance functions that prevent regression and support continued growth. This maintenance does not feel burdensome when the practices have become integrated into your natural rhythm of life. Morning mindfulness feels as natural as drinking coffee. Movement practices become sources of joy rather than obligations. Breathing awareness provides ongoing connection to inner peace rather than emergency intervention for crisis moments. The centered life also becomes naturally generous, as the energy that was previously consumed by anxiety becomes available for creativity, service, and contribution to the well-being of others. Many people discover new capacities for leadership, artistic expression, caregiving, or social engagement as their nervous systems stabilize and their authentic nature can emerge. Living from center ultimately reveals that the peace you have been seeking was never something to be acquired or achieved, but something to be uncovered and remembered. The practices remove the obstacles to natural well-being, rather than creating artificial states that must be maintained through effort. Anxiety was the abnormal condition that required intervention. Peace is the natural state that emerges when obstacles to its recognition are removed. This recognition brings profound rest to the seeking mind that has been searching for happiness and security in external achievements, relationships, or circumstances. When you discover that fundamental well-being is your birthright and natural condition, the desperate search for happiness can finally relax into grateful recognition of what has always been present. The transformation from anxiety to centeredness represents one of the most profound journeys available to human consciousness. It is a return home to your essential nature, while simultaneously developing all the practical skills needed to navigate contemporary life with wisdom and effectiveness. It is both deeply personal healing and preparation for whatever service your unique gifts and circumstances might call for in the world. As more individuals make this journey from reactivity to centeredness, from anxiety to authenticity, from suffering to compassion, the collective transformation of human consciousness advances. Your personal healing becomes a contribution to the healing of the world, as centered presence naturally radiates the peace and wisdom that our world so desperately needs. The storm within has been quieted, not through force or suppression, but through understanding, acceptance, and the patient cultivation of inner resources that were always present but temporarily obscured. In discovering your capacity to transform anxiety into wisdom, reactivity into responsiveness, and suffering into compassion, you join the countless human beings throughout history who have made this journey and discovered that the peace they sought was never missing. It was simply waiting to be recognized in the simple immediacy of aware, embodied, present moment experience. Conclusion: the journey forward, the path we have traveled together through these pages, represents more than an exploration of anxiety and its transformation. It is a journey into the very heart of what it means to be consciously human in a world that often seems designed to overwhelm our nervous systems and scatter our attention across countless sources of stress and distraction. Through understanding the neuroscience of anxiety, learning to work skillfully with automatic patterns, developing somatic awareness, and cultivating the practices that support authentic peace, you have been equipped not just with techniques for managing symptoms, but with a comprehensive approach to living that honors both the sophistication of your nervous system and the profound simplicity of aware presence. The science is clear. Your brain possesses remarkable plasticity that allows fundamental rewiring of the neural patterns that generate anxiety. Your nervous system contains sophisticated self-regulation mechanisms that can be consciously supported and strengthened. Your body holds wisdom about healing and balance that extends far beyond what thinking mind alone can comprehend. These are not theoretical possibilities, but documented realities that provide solid ground for confident engagement with transformative practices. Yet the journey ahead requires more than intellectual understanding or occasional application of techniques during crisis moments. Lasting transformation emerges through consistent engagement with practices that gradually become integrated into your natural way of being in the world. The nervous system learns through repetition and positive experience, building new patterns through patient cultivation rather than dramatic interventions. Remember that healing is not linear. There will be days when old patterns reassert themselves, when anxiety seems to return with renewed intensity, when the peace you have touched feels distant and inaccessible. These experiences are not signs of failure, but normal fluctuations in any genuine healing process. Each challenge becomes an opportunity to apply what you have learned, to deepen your understanding, and to demonstrate to your nervous system that you now have reliable resources for navigating difficulty. The practices outlined in these chapters work synergistically, each supporting and enhancing the others. Present moment awareness creates the foundation for recognizing automatic patterns before they fully develop. Cognitive reappraisal provides tools for working skillfully with anxious thoughts and interpretations. Somatic practices address the physiological foundations of anxiety while building embodied resilience. Your personal regulation toolkit ensures that effective interventions are readily available when needed. As you continue this journey, trust your own experience over any external authority. Your nervous system will teach you which practices work most effectively for your unique constitution and circumstances. Some techniques that feel powerful initially may become less relevant as your system develops greater stability. New approaches may become appealing as your sensitivity and awareness deepen. Remain curious and experimental while maintaining consistent engagement with practices that consistently serve your well-being. The transformation you are undergoing serves purposes far beyond your individual healing, important as that is. As you develop genuine stability and peace, you naturally become a resource for others who are struggling with anxiety and stress. Your presence itself becomes calming and reassuring to nervous systems that are caught in patterns of reactivity and distress. This is not a burden or responsibility to add to your list of obligations, but a natural expression of the healing that has occurred within you. Centered presence radiates without effort or intention, touching others in ways that conscious intervention never could. Your journey from anxiety to authenticity becomes a gift to all those whose lives you touch. Continue to approach yourself with the same compassion and patience you would offer a dear friend who was healing from injury. The nervous system that learned patterns of anxiety through experience can learn patterns of peace through different experiences. But this learning takes time and repetition. Celebrate small victories, acknowledge progress even when it feels slow, and maintain faith in your innate capacity for healing and growth. Stay connected with whatever communities, teachers, or resources support your continued development. Healing rarely happens in isolation, and maintaining connection with others who understand the journey can provide encouragement during challenging periods and inspiration for continued growth. Whether through formal support groups, online communities, workshops, or individual mentoring relationships, surrounding yourself with others who value consciousness and healing creates an environment that naturally supports your transformation. Remember that the peace you have discovered is not dependent on life circumstances being perfect or your internal experiences being pleasant. The awareness in which both anxiety and peace arise remains stable and unaffected by whatever temporary experiences might be flowing through it. This recognition provides the foundation for unshakable well-being that can weather any storm while remaining open to the full spectrum of human experience. The journey from anxiety to authentic peace is ultimately a journey home, home to your essential nature, home to your natural resilience, home to the wisdom and compassion that represent your deepest truth. Everything you have learned in these pages serves this homecoming, removing obstacles to the recognition of what was never actually absent. As you continue forward, carry with you the understanding that you are not broken and never were. Anxiety was a learned pattern that served protective functions in its time, but is no longer needed as your primary response to life's uncertainties. The nervous system that created anxiety patterns has now learned new patterns based on safety, regulation, and conscious choice. Your willingness to undertake this journey, to question old patterns, to learn new approaches, and to commit to your own healing represents one of the most courageous and meaningful endeavors available to human consciousness. In choosing consciousness over reactivity, presence over anxiety, and wisdom over worry, you align yourself with the deepest impulses toward growth and evolution that characterize life itself. The storm within has indeed been quieted, not through suppression or avoidance, but through understanding, acceptance, and the patient cultivation of inner resources that were always present, but temporarily obscured by the turbulence of an overwhelmed nervous system. In this quiet center, authentic life begins, characterized by responsiveness rather than reactivity, creativity rather than compulsion, and love rather than fear. May your continued journey be filled with wonder, discovery, and the deepening peace that comes from living in alignment with your deepest wisdom. May the practices serve you well in every season of your life, and may your transformation contribute to the healing and awakening of consciousness, wherever your path may lead. Remember, if you found value in this exploration, don't forget to like and subscribe for more science-based approaches to mental wellness and conscious living. Your engagement helps us reach others who might benefit from understanding their own capacity for transformation and healing. The path continues forward, and you are well equipped for the journey ahead.